Media Day is now behind us. We have actual basketball to talk about, or at least who is showing up at these actual basketball events, because James Harden is now on his way to Colorado to join the Sixers team after avoiding Media Day and the first day of training camp. I'm here to break everything down in this video, what that means for Harden, what that means on the Sixers, and how much that changes outlook for here, my overall takeaways on why I think this is a bad thing for the organization as a whole, and I'm here to jump into it all. Now, before I get fully into it, I would like to make sure that you guys are hitting that subscribe button. As of now, 88.5% of you guys have not subscribed to the channel yet, so I want to make sure that changed. We got a ton of big plans for the season coming up. That we are now in full swing, hitting that full stride that we're done the offseason, done all the nonsense, the rumors, all the other stuff that has gone down. That is now time to check rock and focus on some basketball. It is to be determined if James Harden will or will not be a part of that. Now, what we know today, the latest, is we woke up this morning. There was a tweet from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN saying Philadelphia 76ers star James Harden didn't practice at Colorado State University on Tuesday, but he's expected to arrive in Colorado as soon as today to join for training camp. Now, later in the day, first off, there was a ton of swirling about this, what the overall takeaways, what the expectations were. I do believe that James Harden can do more damage from being inside the facility, so I've been of the mindset that I'm happy that he avoided Media Day. I do not think it would have been a great thing to give him a microphone and give him the platform to say how he feels, because he has made it quite clear through time and time again with statements like
Morey
this.
is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again.
Now, I will go as far as to say, if Daryl Morey was not moved by James Harden calling him a liar as publicly as he possibly could, I don't think he's going to be moved by a 32 or 34-year-old James Harden causing a fuss in practice. Whatever he does at practice, whether it be not playing defense, not trying, stuff we honestly see from James Harden on a nightly basis anyway, I don't think this is going to move the needle for Daryl Morey's perception. That he has his heels dug in, that he believes he has a set target or set value for what James Harden's worth, and until that meter comes, he is not making a trade. Now, Harden obviously disagrees. And a recent quote from Woj that came later on the day is, quote, he wants to make the 76ers uncomfortable. So uncomfortable, ultimately, they don't think they'll get the best out of him and make a trade. This coming from Woj once again. So I understand the logic. There's kind of two pathways where this goes for James Harden. Number one, he's a good soldier. He suits up. He plays hard. He rebuilds his value after what was honestly a rocky postseason, and rocky is putting it lightly. That yes, he had his highs of highs where he had his 40-plus point performances, hit a game winner over Al Horford, won a game without Joel Embiid. Yes, he did all these things, but he also quit. He also gave up, and he was so bad in the games that he was bad that it cost Sixers games. That's the brutal reality of James Harden, as the highs are incredibly high and the lows are incredibly low. And that's what's frustrating on trying to build a successful team around him, is that when he's at his best, he will carry you to a victory. He is capable of that. He's that talented of a basketball player. But when he's at his worst, you can't win with him on the floor. So that has been personally my biggest frustration with James Harden, and that's absolutely true league-wide as far as why teams don't have the amount of interest for a guy who averaged 20 and 10 just last year, led the NBA in assists just last year. Now, there is a little more clarity on the situation. First off, we have this tweet from my guy, RB Philly Take, saying part 2 incoming for Ben Simmons. I did think this was funny there. It is amazing how much, I guess, practice these Sixers have with this situation at this point. That they've been through this. This is nothing new. The things that is the biggest difference between the Ben Simmons and James Harden situation is, for starters, Ben Simmons was under contract for 4 years, so the Sixers had a little more time to wait it out. He was still 24 years old at that point, coming off where he is already 2 All-Stars under his belt, a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. There was more room for a team to be able to squint their eyes, look at Ben Simmons, see his weaknesses, and talk themselves into making a deal. That is not the case with James Harden. He is exactly who he is at this point. And who that is not a bad player. I am not saying that by any means. There are very few players who, even at this age and stage of his career, can be as productive as Harden. That he is very efficient. He's a guy who's playing some of his best basketball. He's really coming off one of the more successful years of his entire career. But all this nonsense sticks to him. This is the third team that he's now doing these types of actions. And we've seen his entire playbook before in Houston. Him getting fat, him not trying, him not giving up on the court, him publicly making these statements to the media. So the exact same thing in Brooklyn, of him making it very clear that he was not interested in winning. That's what I'm worried about bringing into this organization. And I understand Daryl Morey's standpoint. There's very clearly a disconnect there. And there was a very good article written by Yaron Weitzman of Fox Sports I give Yaron a ton of credit. He essentially is a Sixers reporter on a national stage at this point. He's written a number of books on the process, very tapped in, and he had some good context for the situation for James Harden and Daryl Morey. I'm going to pop this blurb up there, but I do encourage you guys to check out the whole article. But the quote that I tweeted out from this article here is, quote, Harden's position now is that if Morey had treated him and their shared history with the respect he and it deserves, especially considering the pay cut he took just 1 year earlier, a compromise of a deal could have been reached. It's just that with Houston out of the picture, they say, Morey spotted an opportunity to apply some leverage and could not help himself. The main thesis of this article was basically James Harden is an ultra-emotional human being who makes his decisions based on emotions, and Daryl Morey is the exact opposite end of the spectrum, where he's an ultra-analytical human being who bases all his decisions and information on data and hard talking points there. So while they have been the success story, two guys whose legacies are forever entwined when we talk about the how much Morey has invested in him, what a perfect match it was for both of them finding each other, being able to lean on analytics, lean on the three-point shooting, Harden playing his isocentric basketball. There is no Daryl Morey without James Harden, and there is no James Harden without Daryl Morey. I'll say that more about Morey specifically, that I think Harden deserves credit for being the guy. But then again, Morey was the guy that single-handedly picked James Harden out when he was still a six-man at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Not that anyone expected him to be a bad basketball player, but to pick out that guy and think he's a future MVP, a guy who can lead the NBA in both assist and scoring, that's tough to do. So I will give both of them their flowers in this situation. But because of this big difference when we talk about analytics versus emotions, it was always destined to blow up. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing things blow up. We're seeing the frustration. And there's a lot of he said, she said. A lot of this article dove into the he said, she said. What was promised? What wasn't? Those are the lines that I guess none of us will likely ever know the answer to. There's usually three sides to every story, that being James Harden's side of the story, Daryl Morey's side of the story, and whatever the truth is somewhere in the middle of that. Whatever was said in between the four walls of between them kind of dictates who was ultimately right in this situation. If Daryl Morey went out and said, I guarantee if you opt into this contract, I will find a trade for you, and then didn't, that's wrong on Morey's part, that he cannot be doing that. But if that conversation was not had, and there was more of a comment along the lines of, we'll try to trade you, we will do our best, but we can't guarantee it, James Harden can't be throwing a whole hissy fit right now because that's the way business works. And also for Harden to be causing a scene, to be holding up signs in nightclubs, calling Daryl Morey a liar, to be standing in front of groups of Chinese children, calling him a liar, and making it as public as possible, still unbelievable that happened. That does not accelerate the trade process anymore. We just watched the Damian Lillard deal go down. All offseason, it's talked about how badly Damian Lillard wants to play for the Miami Heat. Because he was so loud, because he was so obnoxious and had that circled, Miami ultimately lost out on the battle. That they didn't even know they were bidding against the Milwaukee Bucks because they flew under the radar, they were quiet, and the Heat were ultimately left watching. Now, what does that mean league-wise? Who knows? Right now, Kyle Lowry is expected to be the Heat starting point guard. I'm not ruling the Heat out in a James Harden sweepstake. I really think that is a team that does make sense from a basketball standpoint, although nobody's going to take in a guy that is out of shape and causing a scene in the way that seems like we're going to be seeing at Colorado State University tomorrow. So how serious is James Harden about this? From what it seems, it sounds like dead serious, that he's going to do whatever he thinks is fit to drive him out of Philadelphia. Now, why this is bad for the Sixers is, number one, we already can see the price point for it. For the people talking about that James Harden absolutely still has a market and all these things, just put it this way. Do you think Terrence Mann is a better player than James Harden? Because you shouldn't, because he's not. But the Clippers will not trade Terrence Mann in a James Harden trade. Just think about that for a second, that they are valuing Terrence Mann more than James Harden. And think about what that means league-wide and for his value. Now, I like Terrence Mann. I don't mean this to be a hit on him. He is a fine player, does a lot of good things. But there are levels to the NBA, and James Harden is absolutely clearing him. So for that to be kind of a sticking point in a trade negotiations, I think should put into perspective how difficult it is. Now, the Sixers, the championship window continues to shrink and shrink. They have Joel Embiid still in his prime, still 29 years old. They have this up-and-coming star in Tyrese Maxey. And it's frustrating that once again the entire story of the offseason is we have this overpaid guy that doesn't want to show up, doesn't want to play, and that's all anyone to talk about. Media Day was ruined because every single question was about what to make of James Harden. Is he a distraction? Is he going to be here? Blah, blah, blah. That's frustrating that we're doing this for another season. And if we're shooting this in all reality here, it's tough to enter a season with that and then believe that there's going to be success coming. That unless there is a deal that comes out of the woodwork, the Sixers can find a way to right the ship, this is likely looking at a lost season. Now, I'm not going to completely kick that down the curb and believe in that I think there's a legitimate chance that even if it's not perceived as fair value in the Daryl Morey mindset, I do think there's a world where you can get better fitting pieces and talk yourselves into these Sixers being a contender. As Joel Embiid said at Media Day, every single time he's on the court, he believes he can win. He's one of the top 5 individual talents across the entire NBA, and on the days where he is on, there is no one better than him. He's the reigning MVP of the league for a reason. Tyrese Maxey is going to take another stride forward this year. I have another video dropping next talking about all these steps that I expect from him to make that I'm super excited about. Thankfully, some Sixers content non-James Harden related. But for now, we kind of wait at what the deal is with numero uno here. What is up with Mr. Uno? Are you going to lock in? Are you going to strap up? Are you going to show up for your teammates? And by all accounts, by the way, the whole issue, the root of the issue is very clearly between Daryl Morey and James Harden. Joel Embiid is not a part of that. Tyrese Maxey is not a part of that. Tobias Harris is not a part of that. PJ Tucker is not a part of that. Patrick Beverley is not a part of that. All these guys that you'll be openly disrespecting by not playing in practice, not playing hard, trying to cause a stink, showing up late, all these things that I really expect to see from James Harden, that's disrespectful to those teammates. And those are guys that you still have to look in the eye, still have to have a friendship with. And a lot of these guys, by the way, are guys that he brought to Philadelphia. PJ Tucker specifically stood up there yesterday talking about how he sided with James Harden, that I came to Philadelphia to play with James Harden. Well, now PJ Tucker looks like he's going to be playing in Philadelphia without James Harden unless he's attached to this deal. I'm not saying I feel great about that or that PJ Tucker needs to be here, but it is frustrating that this is how things are going. So for now, we wait on the clock of James Harden. It will be interesting to see how much he pushes the envelope and how serious he is about making life difficult for these Sixers. But unfortunately, the circus looks to be in Philadelphia once again.